Well, Mark, good to see you back in Australia. Did I miss the memo that you retired? Because you've just flogged us up a hill as though you were in the middle of peak training for another season.
Yeah, nah, mate. Can't get away from it, mate. Can't get away from it. Love the outdoors. And when you guys were coming up, they said, yeah, let's go for a bit of a, the Baywatch shoots. We don't need to do those anymore, mate, do we? We need to go and do some yakka out the back. So, yeah, and it was good. And we beat the sun, mate, thank God, which was good.
I guess the point is, you're retired. When people think retirement for athletes, they think, let's just lay back and eat hot chips and, live. But that's not you, and it's not going to be you for quite a while, is it?
Yeah, clearly retired from the car, so no more racing in that sense. But I think, still busy, a lot of travel, and I love being able to still, enjoy my fitness and knocking around with guys that might still be competing and go for different activities and not being a bit of a third wheel, if you like. So just in my nature, I think, to have always been fit, and obviously that's a discipline the racing just taught me for so many years. Since the mid-90s, I've always tried to be in half decent shape, so hopefully that will continue, as long as possible.
Let's talk about the retirement thing. Like you say, you retired from racing. You haven't retired from being busy.
Yeah.
How difficult was it, though, for you to get to that point and say, I'm going to stop doing what I've loved doing for a long, long time?
Yeah, nothing will replace F1, mate, to be honest. Really enjoyed the Porsche days. That was great. Continuity of teammates and the sort of language together and really, lifting one car for one goal was something which I really didn't know how much I was going to enjoy that, which I really did at that point in my career. I didn't want to have that as a youngster, I don't think, but because you're too egotistical. But Formula One is hard to replace, no question about it. And when you stop doing that, for me anyway, it's hard to find other categories or other scenarios that'll stimulate you like that category did, because you're working with incredible people. Obviously, you've got every fortnight you're up against it, and it's a brilliant challenge to measure yourself week in, week out like that. So, but that's how it is, right? So I've got so many, good buddies around the world and people, whether it's business, sport, whatever it is, you have to let go sometimes of certain things, and that's one of them. So it's a young man's game, particularly that category. So, I was so lucky to have the career I did, and now, finding those new avenues and new things which can get as close to that as possible, and also I think the learnings from that, as a professional, when you've had the chance to work at that level, there's no question about you just learn so much about how to do things right going forward, which is really good. So yeah, that's the transition right now.
Do you reckon it would have been really hard for you if you had to have retired at the end of your Formula One career and walk away from racing altogether? Did it make it easier for you that you could transition into WEC, win a world title, and then step away from it all?
Yeah, it would have been hard, mate, to stop straight away, I think, because, Jackie Stewart said to me, he said, look, mate, you feel like you're going to need a break, which I did, like end of 13 and F1, I'm just like, I'd love to just have a bit of a pit stop, because in other sports you can do that, golf, tennis, there's also team sports, maybe you can have a little bit of a break and sort of pop back in. Motorsport, you can't really do that, so you've really got to have the momentum and keep yourself going, I suppose. So, and that was good advice JOS gave me. He said, mate, look, you will want to probably do a little bit more racing. If you're going to do it, try and find a scenario that's going to be obviously a really good setup. And then, Porsche were in touch and said, how's things looking for you in the future? And we're going to come back to sports car racing. So it was really, really great timing that that worked out well. And then, those cars were quick. They were really rewarding to drive. So that was a nice bleed off, you're right, to drive at that level in those type of cars, which were, still really, really quick and challenging. And so I was lucky to get that.
It's interesting when you're in the middle of your Formula One career, for instance, and you're at a race meeting and we come up and ask you to reflect on victories that you've had in the career so far that you've had, you can't, because you're in the middle of racing. Did you have any time to actually reflect now on the 11, 12 years that you had in the category, what you achieved in that category?
Yeah, you do. I think when you do slow down, you sort of look back at it, you're out of the bubble completely, and you have a more of a holistic approach to how and what you did. Obviously, time goes quick, we know that, but also when you in my case, left country New South Wales in Queanbeyan and a little bit of racing in Australia, and you go over there and you sort of if you really looked at, naivety is a great thing. If you look at what's ahead of you, you probably wouldn't, sign up for it, because if you reverse engineer it and say, how the hell am I going to do this? Well, then, yeah, for sure, it's really intimidating and it's going to be tricky to do. But then to have the longevity, and also I was very, very proud, the window when I was in F1 and when I had my most success, certainly towards the back end of my career, was when, Michael was there, Seb was there, Fernando was there, Lewis was there, JB was there, Nico was there. The first 5 rows on the grid were, it was really, really rewarding to race those guys for such a long period. So you look back and that's what you sort of say to yourself. At the time, you're obviously hard on yourself, you're trying to get more out of yourself, but, to have that run of results, I suppose, it's human nature to want more. Yes, I would have loved a world title, clearly, more race victories, clearly, but you're like, when you leave here, you're like, it'd be great just to race in F1, and then you want more, and that's just how we are wired up, I suppose, to want more. But in the end, of course, I'm clearly proud to have done what I've done.
When you're out of that bubble, do you miss the information that you get from being in that bubble, and the stories and the gossip, if you like, and what's going on? Because I guess once you do leave, even though you've still got friends in there, you are out of the loop.
Yeah. Totally out of the loop, yeah. But it doesn't take too many phone calls to get back into it to a degree, particularly from the driver's side. So I know a little bit about how they're feeling going into the new season, having spoken to some of the guys. But it's really the technicity of the sport in terms of what the cars are like and some of those things. I'm not doing that firsthand anymore. So that's something which there's a bit of a gap there clearly, because I'm there's a little bit of guesswork. But in terms of how the sport is, obviously it's changing the guard shortly, but in terms of how motor racing is at that level, still got a reasonable idea and the finger on the pulse, because I've still, doing a lot of, TV work in the UK, and I'm still friends with a lot of the drivers, know the guys, and also sports cars with Porsche. So I'm pretty much still plugged into the motorsport world over there.
The way you are, your approach, your fitness level, all that kind of stuff suggests that most people would say you can jump straight back in one of those cars if you want to, or any other form of racing. What was it about? Was it the World Championship that you got in WEC that made you go, righto, I've ticked all the boxes?
For me, at the end, mate, it was really just I think it was the danger. I'd had enough of, 90% of my career. I got into the car and I wasn't worried about the consequences at all. Like, it was, you're very selfish, you're very driven, helmet's on, and you're fearless, and you're going to get the job done. Where sort of towards the end of my career, I started to think, well, you know what? And I've done some, funky work at Le Mans, 3 in the morning, it is raining, and you're like, you know what? You just start to think a bit too much about it, and that's not the place to be. You start, in my head anyway, maybe some other guys have gone longer. I've had a lot of chats to the legends of that category, if you like Tom Christensen, Alan McNish, those guys who went to 46 and 47. But they didn't have sort of, I suppose, the F1 career in terms of the intensity of what F1 brought. For me, it's not one season in F1. Sometimes F1 seasons can be 2 or 3 years in terms of the workload of the intensity on you. So you had the batteries in that situation in terms of the intensity of Formula One, and then you had sort of at the end of it, for me, was the risky side of that type of racing with amateurs on the track. Obviously, there was a lot more things that were sort of out of my hands, if you like. Clearly in a beautiful race car, presented with great money, the budget that they had. Race cars were gorgeous that I was driving, but so safety was good on that side. But then it's those type of races where you can still get yourself caught out, and I wasn't prepared to take that risk anymore.
Is that losing your edge?
Totally, yeah, it is, because it's part of the analysis of and the DNA as a racing driver. You have to work out, all those columns for sure. There's the stopwatch, there's the technical side, there's using your resources, there's the experience, there's all those things which are still in play, totally. But if then at the end of it you're sort of thinking, well, I'm not really prepared to go to that level, I'm going to take a bit longer to get up to speed or things like that. And I'm really, really hard on myself. Like, I was going very, very well in terms of pace, everything at the end of last year with Porsche, and they were disappointed that I suppose I made the call. But I was like, I didn't want to find out what it was like to go another couple of percent in my head to say I'm not as clean and as crisp as I was. And I don't want to get frustrated with that myself, to know what you can do and what you should have been able to do with how precise and deliver all the time, absolute top notch, or get the most out of yourself, if you like, relatively. So if some of the columns start to drop down a sniff, some guys are happy to keep rolling like that and let it go, but I wasn't really. I wanted to just remember me as close to the maximal as a package as I was, and have it done there.
Who was in that discussion? Obviously you, and
yeah.
Was there a bunch of people that you could lean on to say, this is going to be a big call here, am I doing the right thing, or did you just feel that it was the right thing to do?
Yeah, it was interesting. I had a chat to Niki Lauda in Bahrain at the F1 race, just at a barbecue. We're just chatting actually for quite a while in, it would have been March in 15. And so he was like, the risk side, you know, just how careful you play that one, mate. Just be careful, and you know why. You know, just sort of hit me between the eyes of sort of why this is all still happening and what are the upsides and downsides to it. So Jackie's been great, and of course, you know, Mum and Dad and Anne. Like, you know, at the end of the day, it's your decision. You know, totally your call. You know, and if you want to keep racing, you keep racing, but you can't kid yourself. So, few people from the specialised and industry and the guys that have been there, they've seen all the movies, and then obviously people that are close to you. Obviously the female side, you know, Anne and Mum were very, very keen. Dad less so, because you know he loves the race and he still would go to a go-kart race tomorrow if he could. So yeah, he misses it. But yeah, it's good to get counsel. I think that is very important. And any sportsman or woman, or as I say, anyone that's got to make these pivotal decisions within their career, I think it is nice to sort of have some counsel and ask them, is this normal? What I'm feeling now and what I'm thinking now, is this normal? And I said, yes, that's totally normal. It'll come up on you, and that's how you'll start to feel things, and the motivation, the drive and the passion just starts to roll away.
Remember that flow chart that you and Anne created all those years ago with the hope of getting you to Formula One, and it worked out that way. Did you sit down and create another flow chart for Mark Webber version 2?
Yeah, we have to a degree.
What's on it?
Obviously, yeah, the chart is clearly I'm still I've got some great roles with some brands with Porsche, and a little bit with Michelin, plenty with Red Bull. Just starting a relationship with Rolex, which is great. So doing some Grand Prix with them around the world.
What keeps you going? Because you operate in 2 or 3 time zones a day, and I've seen you do this. What is the drive behind that? Is that just always the way you've been? You've been able to juggle a few things at each time?
In general, yeah. I mean, most of my work and my contracts are in Europe. And now they're facilitating some of those. I was just in North America last week, over there in Palm Springs. So there's more work for me to do. When I got out of the cockpit, clearly there were regional races, around the world. And then now we've got, work to do around the world as well in terms of working with the brands. So you have to be on all time zones. It doesn't really change. It's definitely more skewed towards the Northern Hemisphere in terms of my workload. I love coming to Australia, I love coming in for a break, obviously clearly true blue. But in terms of me having my work ethic and the intensity and the learnings and being in a not more challenging, but clearly it's very competitive over there, and that's why I enjoy working over there.
And away from the business world, away from the car industry world that you're still going to be part of, I guess, for a long, long time. What does family life look like for you and Anne for the rest of your racing retirement?
Yeah, family life I think is a bit more time for ourselves, obviously, to do some of the travelling. There's certain parts of Russia, Mongolia, northern Canada we want to go and see, different parts of the world, which again, we've been extremely fortunate to be able to travel the world to do our sport, but we haven't seen a huge amount of these places because it's you know what it's like, mate. You get there and you're in there, and particularly when we had our head on, we're there to do a job. So now a bit more of a chance to have a good look around and do the sporting events that I always love doing, outdoor pursuits and more sporting events, and mark the calendar and sort of get the calendar. Go, yeah, there's a mountain bike race there. Have a look at that. Have a look at that, and do that. And that's where Anne rolls her eyes and say, okay, we'll go and do that. But get that balance, mate, of really travelling uniquely for somewhere. The bag is nothing to do with motorsport. It's actually, we're going to go and check somewhere out and do it for us, and that's something to look forward to.
Your love of hiking that you took us through today, you love hiking.
You guys did well, mate. You guys did well.
No, it was great fun. Yeah. I mean, Outdoors has always just been part of your makeup, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think, you know, growing up in Queanbeyan, you know, I used to see, it's bizarre, like I used to see some of the Canberra Raiders guys training over the back there at Queanbeyan behind Dad's workshop, and I just had it instilled them in such a young age that was part of a sportsman or women's career, that they had to apply themselves in that area too. So it was never really a chore for me, and then to see that at such a young age, and I think Dad also instilled it into me, that's part of you know, the discipline and the focus and the standards, you know, because when people are working for you, obviously you've got to also show them that you're putting a lot of work in as well, and that comes across clearly as being as professional as possible. So, mate, I loved the country. I am a country boy as well. I'm not a big city guy, if you like, and yeah, I used to, in the off-season, come back and take myself to Thredbo, often through the junior categories, go up to Thredbo for like 2 weeks, and Mum said, yeah, but you want to stay? I said, no, I'm going up there on my own. I used to give myself an absolute, you know, pizzling up there. The AIS had the pool up there and all the facilities back then in the late 90s. So I used to love going up there and hanging out with people in other sports. I love going, and people don't know these guys. That's the good thing, and they're phenomenal athletes. I love hanging out with them and learning off them and seeing how hard they go. And that's something which I'm looking forward to doing more of in the future. You know, being in that environment and those, you know, there's just so many great dark horses out there and unsung heroes, which they're the guys I love hanging around.
We're going to get your form guide on Formula One next week, but there are big changes for the game this year. I want to ask you, if you could change one thing about F1 overall, what would it be? What bothers you the most about that sport?
Probably at the moment is the access. I think we can definitely, you know, increase the access to the sport, and what I mean by that is it, you know, fans in the paddock? Well, probably not. It's going to be difficult to get that balance right, but access in terms of, you know, the great things that happen within Formula One, where that can be fed through a lot more channels. So in terms of, you know, whether it's digital, whether it's more, you know, flexibility on free-to-air and things like that, where more eyeballs can see the sport and the passion and the precision and what the drivers go through. I think it's about the hunger and the focus of the drivers, but clearly it's a very, you know, it's a top-end sport, and some people need some education on that. So the more we can do to put it out there, and not have this exclusive approach, which is a fine line, because Bernie, you know, the old regime used to like that sort of exclusivity, and people were fascinated with that as well. So that's the balance, but I think we can definitely do more to get more people watching it and understanding it.
It's always good to have you back in Australia, mate. Look forward to catching up again, and next time, can we go jet skiing?
Yeah, we can. You've got to have your licence.
Stay away from the hills. Thanks, mate.
See you, mate. Cheers.